What is going on, guys? Carter here with Edge Mindset. We got a video for you. We're taking a look at a Protech SnG that I recently got in a few weeks ago and didn't do an unboxing on because I wasn't quite sure how to handle it because I was a little perturbed about the condition of this knife and I didn't want to come across too whiny and complainy, so I held off from doing a video, but here we are now doing a video on this knife. So this one is currently not being produced by Protech. I believe they are on the PT, the Strider PT version, which the PT is the smallest knife that Strider makes, and they're doing the automatic version of that currently, but I would imagine before too long they're going to go back to the SnG. So if you're not familiar, the SnG is the flagship model of Strider knives, and Strider Knives has been making knives for a very long time, since back in, I think, the late 90s, early 2000s. I can't remember off the top of my head when the very first SnG popped up on the scene, but they were making folders, the liner lock AR and GB before the frame lock SnG ever came out. But this was kind of their flagship model, and it's the medium, large size, great for EDC, but still tough as nails knives. So Protech is one of the very few collaborations that Strider has actually ever done, and it's the only production collaboration currently going on that I am aware of. Strider has done some collaborations in the past with Microtech knives, particularly in the Marfione custom line style of knives, but they also did some production knives back in the mid-2000s. Well, what I'm calling the mid-2000s, 2014, 15, somewhere around there. But currently, this is the only collaboration that they're currently doing, and this is the only quote-unquote affordable, what most people would call affordable Strider knife that you can currently get once these are in production again. Now, of course, affordable is a subjective term, but these retail, I believe, around $250-ish, give or take. The specifics of the model and how it's set up and things like that. They do a bunch of different versions of this. This is the super tactical operator version, because if you don't know, that's what I do on the weekends. So during the week, I am an office worker, and on the weekends, I do super tactical, cool, operational type stuff. So I needed a knife to accomplish those goals. I'm kidding. I don't do any of those things, but I really appreciate those that do those kind of things, and I admire them greatly. So my little wimpy attempt at that is to buy knives that would apply to them, even though I don't necessarily have a direct use for something like that. And that's what this is. So we're going to attempt to do a full review of this knife. I am going to do my best to review this as a standalone knife and not assume that you're familiar with an SnG and its ergonomics and the basics of it, as well as point out some cool features with this knife and maybe take 2 seconds to complain about buying this knife, kind of as a heads up to you. So I'll do that right now. Let's get that out of the way. I'll make it as brief as possible. So I bought this knife. It hasn't been made in a while. I bought this as listed as like new in box, and stupid on my part. I just assumed that his interpretation of like new in box matched my interpretation. Once I got it, I realized that was not the case. This had been carried extensively. It was full of crud. I actually took this apart and cleaned it out. Very difficult to put back together. I've taken this SBR apart and put back together. Much easier. So that's the first tip. It can be done. It's not super painful, but it was trickier putting this one back together than your standard side opening Protech automatic knife. It has, it was carried, it was used. It has marks all over it. Carry marks, and not, here's the thing, right? Like, there's some more back here. It was super dirty. I imagine it's cut a bunch of stuff. It's been carried. The problem isn't that it's used, right? It's not, I didn't necessarily want a safe queen or a pristine example of a knife. I don't really care. It all comes down to the price paid, right? So the price I paid was a good price for a like new in box, only handled, maybe light carry knife. But now that it's clearly been used and carried and cut and has marks and it was full of crud, now all of a sudden the price I paid isn't so good. I actually overpaid for the knife now. But that's on me because I needed to do more due diligence. I should have looked at the photos closer, asked for a video. So the moral of the story is don't just assume that somebody's grading system matches yours. This particular individual, I now realize, just wasn't as familiar with the knife world. He was a casual knife guy. So in his mind, it functions. There's no major damage. It's like it's new in box, right? A lot of us crazy knife collector fanatics have a different opinion of what that means. So let's move on. Anyways, don't want to spend too much more time on that. Doesn't really matter. It is what it is. So this is the operator edition. It is all blacked out. 154 cm steel, which I think is an interesting choice. I don't know why they went with that. I don't know if it was kind of like a throwback type steel, because I know Protech does a lot of different versions of this particular knife, and they do it in a lot of different steels, handles. There's custom versions. In fact, I used to have a custom Nightmare Ground version of this Protech SnG that had mirrored primary bevels and all kinds of cool stuff on it. I wish I still had it. It was numbered. Way cooler than this one, even though this one's pretty damn cool as well. So they do a lot of different versions. This one's in 154 cm, 7075 aluminum chassis, which is kind of what Protech is known for. You can see this rock eye right here. It also has an aluminum clamshell chassis just like that. And then this SBR is the same thing. So Protech has been around for many, many years. In fact, one of my earliest nice knife memories was a Protech that I purchased. It was a Walter Brend collaboration. They did 3 different versions. The Brend, I think it was just called the Brend, the Protech Brend 1, 2, and 3. And I bought the biggest one because, in those days, and things aren't that much different now, but in those days, a big automatic knife was the bee's knees. It was the cat's pajamas. It was the whole kit and caboodle. It was so cool. This would have been like 2012, 13, something like that. And it had like a 4.5-inch blade, I want to say. This thing was a beast. I wish I still had it. So Protech's been around for a long time. They're primarily known for side opening automatics like this. They have done a few OTFs. They did a single action OTF. I forget, Dark Angel, maybe is what it was called, something like that. I think that might be the only single action OTF or OTF they've done. I could be wrong, but like I said, they're primarily known for side opening automatics, all made in the US. Another noteworthy thing about Protech is an amazing warranty. Very, very good. They will take care of you. If you buy one of their knives, you have an issue, they will take care of you. So they do collaborations with a bunch of makers. We've listed some: Walter Brend, Les George, and Emerson. They do automatic versions of Emerson knives, as well as Strider here, which is pretty rare to have an automatic Strider knife. Now, you may be wondering, this is all cool, it's all tactical, it's all blacked out, 3/4 ground blade. Very, very neat. What secrets does this knife hold? Well, there's one major secret, and you're looking at it right in the button there. So this is actually a tritium vial that has been put inside the button. And the primary reason I wanted this version, because that is just so cool. This is one of those things where usually you have to pay a lot of money to get tritium in a knife. Not that tritium's super expensive, it's just usually only included in like super fancy editions and things like that. So being able to get a relatively normal version of a knife with tritium is always cool. I think these retailed for under $300. The SnG from Protech is usually around $250, depending on the configuration and materials and things like that. So what is tritium? It is radioactive material that glows 24/7. Usually lasts about 8 years until it kind of burns out and then it no longer works. The reason it's in the button, as you can imagine, is if you are in a dark room or a dark situation, you can easily identify this button and deploy this knife. You don't have to feel around for the button. Protech does not have a safety, so they set that button in flush so that if you press on a flat surface, it's not going to fire on you. You have to be intentional with firing this knife, and if you're wearing gloves, it can be kind of hard to find that button, so it gives you a nice visual reference to fire this bad boy, and it fires hard. Protechs are known for hard firing knives. It's kind of one of their calling cards, and this one is no exception. However, there is something that bugs me on this particular knife, and I will note that. I'll have to caveat it. Well, let's talk about it right now. It has a little bit of play in the locked position, which is pretty common for button locks. This North Mountain Knives here has a little bit of play, way less than this, but a little bit of play. Most button locks seem like they have some play in them. However, Protech usually doesn't. This one has maybe, no, I mean, this one's rock solid. This Rockeye is absolutely bank vault, no play whatsoever. They usually do it very, very well. This particular one has a little bit of play, and I don't know if it's just this one or this set of models, if the other SNGs do as well, because this one's set up a little bit different. You can see it has external stop pins, just like the quote-unquote real SNG does, and that is what interfaces with the frame and stops the blade. You can see there is no stop pin in there, unlike the Rockeye, which uses an inset stop pin, and the SBR, which uses an inset stop pin. This is usually how Protech does it, with a steel bar that's inset in the clamshell aluminum. This one, in keeping it to the original, uses a pin that's pressed through the blade. You can see it is actually pressed, just like a real SNG. It's not screwed in there, which is good for strength, right? You don't want really screws and things holding that on, because this is what actually keeps the blade in the open position. And that is what's causing a little bit of play, because if I take something like a gross paper towel that's over here and cover up the thing so that it adds just a, oop, actually unlocked on me there. So it actually adds a little bit of, that was dumb. I practiced this before I did the video. It just didn't work on me there because it was too thick. But if you add a little bit of material in between that pin and the frame there so that the blade is just set a little bit further, that sets the lock out a little bit more, and it doesn't have any play. So the point I was trying to make is that it's just set back a little bit too far, and this plunge lock is coming out all the way, and it's got just a little tiny bit of movement going on in there. You can see right there, there's a little bit of deformation on the aluminum from it firing and opening up. It's quite possible that this had zero play out of the box, but as it's been used and fired, it's slowly broken in and had a little bit of play. That's really the only complaint I have on this knife. You can see, let's do a comparison. You can see it is the exact same size as the real SNG, or, you know, the Strider proper SNG. If there's any sort of difference, it's just because the camera is at a slight angle and it makes the thing in front look a little bit bigger. But it is, rest assured, it is the exact same size. The standard SNG has thicker blade stock, however, as you can see right there. And then the Protech has a little bit of a thicker handle. Now this one does have some contouring on it, but it's pretty representative of the quote-unquote Lego version. And you can see if I line that up exact, this one does have a thicker handle, which actually makes it a little bit more comfortable, for me at least, than the standard SNG. Now let's do a weight comparison. This is kind of surprising. This has thinner blade stock, remember, and an aluminum handle. It does have a lanyard on there, though, so that's going to add a little bit of weight. 5.3 ounces. And if we take the regular SNG, 4.4. So almost an ounce heavier, which is pretty interesting in my opinion, because this has titanium and G10, whereas this is all aluminum. Thinner blade stock. This does have 3/4 ground blade though, so there is a little more, in theory, material up here compared to the full flat ground blade, even though this isn't really a true full flat ground blade. You can see it does have some flats up at the top there. So yeah, just something I found kind of interesting, that I would have thought that this aluminum chassis one would have been lighter than the titanium version there, but that's not the case. When you're talking about ergonomics, a lot of people talk about how Striders are way more ergonomic than you think they're going to be, and that is true. This is quite ergonomic. I think some of it depends on your hand size, because you can see how my finger fits up in this choil here. These fit on the flat, and then it kind of matches and fits in this little groove right there. Especially when you're holding it like this, it is quite ergonomic. Now, that being said, I think some of it's an illusion. Some of the Strider ergonomics are an illusion because you're so prepared for it to feel like crap that when you grab it and it doesn't feel like crap, you're like, that's amazing. You do still get a hot spot right here. I mean, you will, right? This is a square handle. You're going to feel something, right? It's not going to be the same as a handle completely designed for absolute ergonomics, because there is a little bit of a point here, but you really have to squeeze in order for that to even be noticeable, let alone uncomfortable. When you grab up here, it becomes way less ergonomic if you choke up, because this tip is hitting, at least me, it's hitting right here. If you have smaller hands, it would probably be closer to this. And once again, it's one of those deals where it feels way better than you expect it to. But, you know, comparing it to something truly designed for the hand, it still lacks a little, I guess. And this is something, because I hear a lot of people mention that in my videos. I'm a big fan of Strider. They talk a lot about how they heard it's so much more ergonomic than it looks, which is absolutely true. However, you know, it still is generally a pretty squared handle with some points on it. You are going to feel some potential hot spots, but way less than you're probably expecting. Let's check the cutting edge on this. It has a 3.5-inch blade, but the cutting edge is 3 inches. That's another thing a lot of people complain about with Striders, is how big this front choil is, and then they have a very generous sharpening choil right there. In the original Strider, it is there for a purpose, because this is what acts as the blade stop in the closed position that interacts with a piece in the back here, a little hump that's right there that prevents the blade. You know, it's what causes it to close and allows the detent to interact with the blade there. But a lot of people complain that for a knife that's relatively large in size, for most people's standards, I don't really consider it particularly large, but it's 8.25 inches overall about. Only 3 inches of cutting length. And what I would say is, how much cutting length do you need? Like, most of my cutting takes place up here in the front. Occasionally I'll get kind of here in the middle, but I can't remember a time where I've had to swap out knives because I was using something, you know, like this, and I was just like, I just don't have enough reach. I don't have enough reach on that knife. I need to get something that has an extra ½ inch of cutting length. Just not something that I deal with. Now, you could make the complaint that you're getting more cutting length on a smaller overall knife. And what I would say is, that is true. That is very true. But what I would like to counter that with is, in my opinion, being able to get a grip and being able to get knife reach is still of value, right? It's not all about cutting length, or else we would just carry around loose blades in some sort of container and just pull them out and just use our fingers, right? This is awkward. There's another reason for the handle. It gives you purchase, it allows you to manipulate the tip easier, and it allows you to get more reach on that tip so that you can get into places that you might not be able to reach if you're just ham-fisting up towards the blade. Anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. I think that's more than enough cutting length, even though a lot of people complain about cutting length to overall length being a little out of whack. I still think it's great. Why am I looking at that knife? This is for the Protech, but it's the same principle on this particular knife. No side-to-side play on this guy. Rock solid in that regard. Just feel a little bit up and down, which is common for button locks, which is why I don't particularly like them. But when you're talking about side opening automatics, you know, it's a really good choice and very, very common for that. I really like how they echo as much as they possibly can, putting these screws, which are the same style of screws, on the front here. And you got to remember, this was designed way back in the day. These Protechs were designed before the new style of M Striders were a thing, where they're using these kind of blank butt caps here, even though the newer Striders don't use these, and they're actually going through pillars through here, and they have 2 screws on each side. This is a slightly older version. So they really made an effort to make this look like a Strider as much as possible, including using this tabbed capture system for the pocket clip. You can see how it's literally the same style pocket clip that they have going on here. They even chose to put the screws on the show side so that it matched what a real SnG looks like, as well as using this pin system, which is unique to this particular model. They very easily could have made it closer to their standard SnG protocol and just kind of made it shaped this way and called it good. But they really put a lot of effort into making it look like a Strider. About the only thing that they didn't do was the classic chain link pivot system that is kind of a hallmark for the Strider. They used a standard Protech pivot system. I'd imagine That has to do with not wanting to redesign the entire automatic deployment system to fit a custom pivot. But man, would that be cool if they were able to make that work. So that's it, guys. We took a nice, long, lengthy look at a knife I almost didn't even want to do a video on. Funny how that works. We're at 20 minutes now, and I debated even featuring this knife in a video, and here we are. All right, guys, comment down below. Do you own a Protech SnG? Do you think they're cool? If you tried one, I would recommend you give it a shot as soon as these are available. Till the next video, you guys take care.